This episode is brought to you by Future Group, delivering smarter, safer and more sustainable solutions for the built environment. From fire safety to lighting and electrical, cutting-edge EV charging, advanced security systems, regeneration works and full-scale decarbonisation, we've got your property needs covered. Trusted by property managers across the UK. Visit future-group.uk. Future Group, leading today for a better tomorrow.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Four Walls, and today I'm joined by James Phipps, whose journey from humble beginnings to business success is truly remarkable. Born in Pinehurst, Swindon, James attended Commonwealth School, where he discovered his love for learning, setting the stage for his impressive career. At 18, instead of following the traditional university route, James began his career in the mobile phone industry, eventually taking over as Managing Director of Excalibur in 2010 at the age of 30. Under his leadership, Excalibur became a Times Top 100 employer, and James went on to complete a successful management buyout in 2013. A true entrepreneur at heart, James has since bought, sold and invested in a variety of businesses across different sectors, all while mentoring other business owners. He is also currently involved in Westspring IT, where he's continuing to make waves in the tech world. But beyond business, James's real passion lies in helping others. He co-founded the Younite Foundation in 2016 and is deeply involved in numerous charitable causes in Wiltshire and Kenya. He was also a non-exec director for the Swindon Wildcats and has been a tireless advocate for his community, including developing work in supporting domestic abuse charities. And today we'll hear about James's journey, his business insights and how his values of ethical business practices, community support and helping those affected by domestic abuse have shaped his life. So welcome, James, to the podcast. It's an honour to have you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. So can you tell me a little bit about your early life in Swindon and what shaped your drive for success?
So I grew up in a council estate in Swindon, and it was it's quite tough living. No one drove. My parents still don't drive now, bless them. And I think it made me really focused. I had a loving family, but I didn't want to live there. So at the age of 16, I'd already got to the point where I'd started my first little business when I was 11, trying to make money to pay for bills and pay for food and things like that, buy my own clothes. I ended up moving out when I was 16 because I just didn't want to spend my life in that estate, truthfully speaking. And I actually bought my parents a cooker when I left, because our cooker hadn't worked for a few weeks. Various hobs weren't working. It got to the point where it was almost useless, and that was my goodbye gift. And moved in with three other blokes near the Swindon outlet village that had never met before. Quite scary. Remember that first night, but actually it was always part of me to say, I'm not going to follow the path that probably everyone else is traditionally going to follow. And it meant at the age of 16. I was working full-time in the outlet village, whilst also being a full-time student, did all my A-levels, plus I did NVQs in customer service as well, level 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. So I was pretty full-on, very, 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 very busy. And it's also the time I met my wife at school, and at 17 we actually moved in together. So a really busy time in my life, but it really formed the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's a bit of an unconventional route to, by joining in the mobile phone industry instead of going to university. What influenced that decision? Because you love learning, but you didn't want to go to uni. And
it's quite ironic because I hate mobile phones. But it was me and my wife, who I married a couple of years later. Had to pay rent, so I was like, what job can I go for that I can go and earn some money? And actually, sales always interested me. And I was walking through the Brunel Centre in Swindon, and there's a tiny, tiny little mobile phone shop in there. And I saw a sign saying, sales assistants. And so I walked in, and I happened to be the owner of the shop. We had a sort of almost a 10-minute chat, and he said, you start on Monday. So I've never actually had a proper interview in my life. I've never done a CV in my life because that was that. And I remember thinking at the time, mobile phones are quite big, but not ginormous. But I thought, they could go somewhere, these mobile phones. So let's have a go. And on the first day, shutter pulled up. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I sold 20 mobile phones that day, 20 contracts that day. earned myself probably £100, £200 in commission, and thought, yeah, this is an industry that's, I can go and make some good money, pay for a wedding, had to pay for house and everything else like that. So I can go and earn some really good money. And I did earn some really good money, even if I still to this day don't really know a lot about mobile phones.
So how did you get from that to Managing Director at Excalibur at 30 years old?
I was just very, very good at sales. So I went from shop assistant to manager to then area manager to sales director. So I worked my way up the company. I think that's always given me appreciation then for every role that's in a business. I think when you've done that, because you appreciate what everyone's got to go and do. And I always felt like I never asked someone to do something I wasn't doing myself. So when we had the shops, I'd hoover the shops, I'd clean, I'd do anything, put the rubbish out, anything that was going to be done. And I always tried to remain that way as I went through all those different roles. And when I got to the age of 30, the business was in a bit of a pickle, in truth, because actually the mobile phone networks didn't really want people selling in retail on the high street anymore. Mm-hmm. So you saw people like Phones For You a couple of years later went bust. I saw that coming. So the opportunity was there to say 2010, obviously the economy was really wobbly. So there's a lot of people really panicking in terms of, business owners and others. Actually, I saw it as a huge opportunity. When businesses get into trouble, it makes them change. So from a customer perspective, I said, look, we should be looking at B2B. Let's not do consumer. We can't do anything in retail anyway. Let's go into the B2B. So I closed the shop in Swindon, and they backed me to open an office just in Swindon, but focused on B2B, so more of a Monday to Friday sort of experiment. And it was a really big experiment. But actually, I really showed that was the path forward. That was the way of us trying to add that value to people and do something that wasn't really being done at the time. Localised, all built around service. And, there was a massive, massive growth opportunity there.
When you won Wiltshire Business Person of the Year, was that when you were at Excalibur? Or?
I've actually won it 2 years in a row, which is really embarrassing, and I didn't want to put it in the first place. And I remember the second time I ran it, no one's ever won it twice before. And I remember sitting there saying to the team around me, I'm never, ever, ever gonna ever be involved in an individual award again. It feels deeply uncomfortable to me to have that accolade. But at the time, I suppose it was a needs must. If you felt like, I could create any noise for the business. We didn't have a big marketing budget. I didn't, have a lot of money, etc. So it was anything that could create an opportunity. You've got to take in business. We all know that, don't we? Yeah. Yeah, I won that when I took over. They could see in the first year and then the year afterwards, the change that I'd made into that business was absolutely seismic. I completely and utterly tipped the business upside down and transformed it into... We called it Excalibur 2.0 because it was just unrecognisable, and hopefully in a positive way as well. And we went away from being something which was financially really, really, really struggling to something then that was starting to genuinely create something that was sustainable and profitable, but built in a way that was all saying, how can we engage with the community? How can we do the right thing rather than being focused on profit?
Yeah. Well, that's incredible in itself, because there's not a lot of businesses, I don't think, that look out to the community and look to see where they can help and what they can do. And, I've always admired you as a person. I'm not going to try and make you feel really uncomfortable now, but I have always admired you as a person for what you do in the community and around all the charity work and everything. But what led you to sell Excalibur?
Yeah, so it'd been planned for a long time. So I'd brought a team in. I was running the business in a way that didn't involve me needing to be in the business. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a surprise to anyone. I always give a tip to anyone else who's in business. If you make a choice, I wanted to be retired before the age of 40. And what I define by that is not needing to work. So, doing what I love doing without the need to be around something maybe 5 days a week, etc. So I don't know why, even as a kid, I had that thing 40 in my head. I had no plan to do that, but it's a bit of a burning thing there. I did it with sort of 2 years to go. But actually, for me, it was more around, I put in 120%. I mean, I worked an insane amount of hours. I'd sleep for probably an hour and a half a night. So I crammed in what most people would do in a 50-year career into half a dozen years. And I did it knowingly, and I did it willingly, and I did it with conversations with my wife. Do we want to walk into this? This is, you're going to have to sit there and back me up and do all that miscellaneous stuff. So she never worked in the business, but we did that as a team. So, she helped the kids growing up. And actually, someone always spoke to me and said they didn't have the relationship with their children they wish they had. Right. And if they turned their clock back, they'd have realised they thought they were doing it for their family, but actually their family wanted them more than they ever needed any house or car or anything else like that. Yeah. And it really stuck with me when I had that conversation with them. So I decided, firstly, I was a bit burnt out, in truth, and I think you've got to recognise that as a leader, because you've got a responsibility. When I left there, we had nearly 70 people working for me, that I can't carry on doing that at 110%. There's at some point where you go, you're declining, even if you're not realising that you're declining. And I think you have that responsibility then to look at the team to bring in fresh energy and to give that fresh direction, etc. And I think in some ways, actually, I probably cared too much. I probably cared too much about the community and the team. I was so passionate about those two things that takes something out of you if you genuinely, feel that in some way, shape or form. So I think it was a myriad of things. My children were at that age where I thought I've got best part of probably a decade left now before they probably, go to university or want to move out. I can always back myself to make more money, but I can never, ever get that time back. As you mentioned, I just sort of semi-unretired myself in January and have been back out. My daughter's been weirdly like, oh, hang on, dad's not like there every hour of every day. And they sort of feel it, like we keep trying to explain to them, this is a normal environment, what normally happens. But actually, it's been very, very short term, only for sort of 5 months. But I love the fact that they've realised how stark that difference is, because then I think it's made them appreciate you've had us around, both me and your mum, around 24/7 to give you that support as growing teenagers. That's been the single most important thing, and that was the biggest reason for doing it. But really it was also, I think you've got to take some time, get some gas back in the tank, and also follow the charitable stuff that I really enjoy doing. And I've had a huge number of people now with 100% of my time, whereas before it was probably 50, 60, 70% of my time.
Yeah, so is that why... you've said then about you enjoy helping people and everything. Is that why you've invested and mentored several other businesses? Is that what drew you to that, or is it your business acumen?
When I've helped charities, and I've been on board of lots of charities like the Wiltshire Ambulance or the Community Foundation or the Platform Project, lots and lots of charities I've been involved in at a board level, and lots that I've helped that have not been on a board level. I like to make something successful. A charity to me is just a business with a different purpose. Yeah. The profit is helping someone or doing something at the end of it. The business has a slightly different flavour to it. So my agreement has always been with a business that I've looked at. It's either been, if I help you to be successful, I want you to pass it on, whether that's monetary, whether that's supporting the community, whatever that is. That's my win. That's my payback in some way, shape or form. Or about 80% of all the investments I've made in the businesses have been female-led, because the reality is females do not get the investment or the help or the support at all in the environment that we're in the UK. So I've done things very deliberately. Either it's been because they've had a social impact or an environmental impact, or actually, that's very specifically, I'm a slightly raging feminist in a house of, I've lived with my wife my entire adult life and 2 daughters. I've tried to see if I could, in some very tiny, small way, level up that playing field. So it's either been something that's driven me, there has to be a passion behind it, having an impact or creating a social change.
You just said about starting with Westspring IT recently and confusing your family because you're not in the house anymore. Yeah. What excites you about them in order for you to come out of retirement for it? Yeah. What made you become involved?
To be honest with you, it was in some ways regrettable, and I'll always be honest and transparent, even at my own beast. But the Excalibur business that I had, that I'd walked away from, very unfortunately chose to sell to the one player in the marketplace that I would never, ever, ever have engaged with, and I'd always asked them to never engage with, because they were always going to offer the biggest check. But culturally and ethically, I always found them appalling. And they sold to them around a year ago, and what I thought would happen has happened. And in fact, messages even yesterday on LinkedIn. Most of the core team have all left. They've been made redundant. The whole heart and soul has been ripped out of that business, and it's a shell that's been left. And I felt I've always taken leadership responsibility very seriously. I couldn't control something after several years. I sort of stepped out operationally 2016-17, and I'd already done the deal and then formalised that more publicly in 2018. So it's been several years since that's been gone through. But I still felt I picked those people, and that's my responsibility. And that was pure greed, truthfully. I understand, again, if people say they haven't got the gas in the tank or whatever their logic is, I get that, I understand that. And if people want financial security, I understand all those things, but actually I found it to be deplorable. And I was thinking about what am I going to do about it. I looked at, do I do a start-up? And had a couple of conversations with a few people. I looked at a couple of businesses. And ironically, at the same time I was doing that, and I'm a massive believer in fate, I had a message through from the founders of Westspring, who I'd had a couple of conversations with over several years. Again, I like to give people help and advice, and they said, we've gone through this really significant growth in the last couple of years, and we've realised we owe it to the team to have more experience in, and actually you're the one person that we've always come across who's been, honest and ethical. We think you times top 100 employee, look after the teams. It's really important for us that's central to anything we ever did with a business person. Would you now finally sort of come in and have that chat? And I said, do you know what? Yes, I will. And I am a big believer in fate, So actually, some of the stuff that I'd already had planned with some of the people that I'd previously worked with, it was, okay, well, I'll tell you what, I can bring these people in. So I've managed to bring in a COO, actually someone I worked on the board of a charity with, who took over from me as chair. Phenomenal female leader, and finance director I work with in several businesses I've invested in, and actually about to be in the public domain, but on Monday there's going to be a female CEO who's appointed, who came from the Excalibur business as my old right hand as a sales and marketing director at that time. So again, uniquely, it will be one of the very, very, very few businesses in that tech world that's going to have a female-led leadership team. I'm not doing that just deliberately because I think they're phenomenally talented and very, very skilled, but there is a byproduct of me that makes me quite proud to be able to help influence that in some way, shape or form. But what I do know is we're aligned in that we all care about the community. We all care about doing things for charity. We're aiming to do more money for charity this year than the 8 years since the business has been formed. We're massively enhancing, team benefits. I've always been keen to give away what I have. Drives my wife absolutely mad. But my argument has always been, you knew from school, we sat next to her at the age of 11, you knew what I was like. I gave money to things even at the age of 11. I did my first sleep out for a homeless charity when I was 16. So I've always been like it. So finding people like that, to me, is the art of success. It's finding the people at the same values and having people who you're all aligned to where you want to get to. Our aim in that business is not to get to a point to sell it. The first thing I've done when we walked it in is we're giving every single member of the team having shares given to them. Every single person. I'm learning the lessons that I should have maybe learned the first time round. And I think sometimes leadership, you've got to put your hands up and go, I didn't know COVID was coming. I didn't know that would have that effect and the world changed, etc. But you can learn from some of those things and build it so that can't ever happen again. And those changes have been made. So I feel like we've got something which has got a really similar culture. It's got a real similar feel to it. It's got a real similar vibe when you go into the office environment. But at the same time, I don't like tech, truthfully, and I don't like comms. I don't like tech. But what I do like is making someone happy. So whether that's been in charity or wherever it is, and in business, if you're solving someone's problem to make their business a better business, I get a real kick out of that in some way, shape or form. And actually, IT and comms, we all know if it doesn't work or it's not great, it can absolutely strangle a business. So actually for me, in giving ethical advice, doing it as a value-led conversation where you're not trying to just rip someone off and sell them something they don't need, etc. The marketplace is full of a lot of those, and I think there's an ability there of then helping someone try and do it the right way. And when it makes money, help give that money away and help the community, etc. So that's what pulled me out from the retirement land. But it was and I'll be brutally honest with you, I've been absolutely exhausted because by the time you dust the cobwebs off, it's been a long time since I've done five days a week, but the CEO starts on Monday, so I've been counting down the hours, and my wife's been counting down the hours, and I think she's keen on giving me some more ironing to do next week.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, she needs you back home to, do what you should be doing.
Yeah. It's been a real journey, but I always think these things, you learn more about yourself and you learn more about the people that are around you, and therefore I've loved every second of it, even if it's been quite difficult.
I've always found you incredibly inspiring as a person, but to hear that story of what you want to achieve with the business is just incredible. But if somebody was starting their own business in today's ridiculously crazy world, what advice would you give them?
Well, I give this advice quite a lot. I do a lot of stuff with things like young enterprise. I do a lot of stuff in schools and colleges, and I'll always say the same as I would to everyone else is, being an entrepreneur, going to be a business, it doesn't make you cleverer, it doesn't necessarily make you harder working, it's your appetite for risk. You shouldn't be crazy about it. I spent a lot of time, it looked like some of the things I did in my life were utterly crazy. When I took over Excalibur, we borrowed every penny we could borrow, emptied every bank account. I had a newborn and a 2-year-old. It was the single worst time we could ever have done it. I had to give a personal guarantee for $250,000, which was more than my net assets at the time, in house and everything else like that. Every single person around you would have gone, that's nuts, because the odds of success were below 50%, and I had to have that honest chat with my wife. And I think the challenge is in the UK market especially is it's like entrepreneur's a dirty word, and actually we're making it even more so in schools now. I did a careers day the other day in a massive secondary school, and they give you a label tag, entrepreneurs, you're sat next to someone in the army and someone who's doing X, Y and Z, and they don't look at it as a viable option anymore, because we try and beat the risk into people to go, oh, it's crazy, that's going to go wrong. If you go to America, it's the exact opposite way. They just go for it, right? And if you go bankrupt 5 times, well, maybe your 6th one wins, because you'll learn something about it. So I always say to people, if you solve a problem in a business, it's just whether there's enough of a problem, there's enough of a marketplace. Unless you're truly bad at execution, you're probably likely to do really well. So I'll give you an example. I invested in a business called How About really early on. It's an app, and it was 3 guys who came out from university, went slightly different paths in their 20s, and went, trying to get us all together again is a nightmare. Like, it's logistically a nightmare, especially with males, let's be honest. We're not very great at organising ourselves. So why don't we create an app that helps us organise get-togethers and help us get together? Really simple idea. They're just about to go through the 5 millionth download of that app in a couple of years. A phenomenal bunch of people, and they've got a phenomenal team that's around them now as well, by just solving a problem. Because what they realised was, I'll check with our friends, I'll check with the other people, well, they're the same. They all think the same. Well, actually, we're not unique here. How many people are in our age bracket that are feeling the same way? Yeah. There's hundreds of millions of those in the world. So actually, you know what? We only need that percentage of those people to go and download this, use it, engage with it, and we've got something worth a huge amount of money. So they didn't have necessarily the technical knowledge to do the app. They didn't have the knowledge of being a startup before. But what they decided was, for very different reasons in their roles, like one was working in the city, I'm not sure I want to do this, and I want control of my own destiny. But you do need a degree of vision, and you need that degree of confidence to go, if I don't believe in myself, no one else is going to believe in me. So do you know what? Go for it. And if the worst that can happen, when I sat on the NHS board, I couldn't have this chat, because if it goes wrong, people do actually die.
Of course.
But in most businesses, what's the worst that can happen, right? As long as no one dies, anything else you can sort out. So you can make more money again, you can go again, you can sit there and, people, if they lose their jobs, they'll go and find other jobs, generally speaking. So, actually go for it. And I will say that to the kids in the schools and college, go for it, the younger the better. Because the more you go through life, the more you've got to lose. Whereas when you're a kid, you go, I've got nothing to lose, right? When I was a 16-year-old, living by myself, so I'd always say go for it, but do the sensible sense checking, right? So you might think, you get an X Factor where someone says, my daughter's the most amazing singer in the entire world, and there's no one else who's ever listened to them, and then they go and sing and it's truly horrifically bad. Maybe just try and get a gig in a social club or saying, do you know what, first, there's 50 people, and if those 50 people tell you you're a great singer, maybe you're onto something, right? But just do some small degree of sense checking before you, I don't know, get all your friends and family to put in every penny they've got, or you dedicate, 100 hours a week going into it. But actually, it doesn't need to be a lot. You don't need to have a lot of money. I didn't start off with money. It's not, you need that. Most people, it's about having the right vision. And are you solving that problem? You get lots of people who have a really great idea with poor execution, or actually a really poor idea that they execute really well. And you can see those sort of in the businesses. So if you can get that blend, right, great. And actually the other tip I'd always say, like these 3 people who created How About, the strength is in that trio. They're all different people. They're all different characters. They can challenge each other from their different perspectives. And to me, that's the reason. The first time I saw it was like, you are going to absolutely make it. I think I probably had more confidence than they had. You're going to absolutely make it. Because you can tell the people that just are like an island, some of them make it occasionally. But even if you take someone like Elon Musk at the moment is a good example, something happens to that one person, the whole thing gets flattened. So actually the strength is in saying you've got the right people with the right skill set, but actually the ability of taking that challenge and having those people who feel comfortable to challenge you means you're far more likely to be successful than you go it alone. And it's a long, hard slog. And we both know when you run a business, it's unbelievably lonely. You can be married, you can have the great friends, you can have, even great people in your business that work with you, but it's never quite the same. And actually, the more people you can have around you to make that circle fantastic. And it could be that's the person you have a coffee with every month or every quarter or even twice a year. Or it could be someone who has a mentor or a coach. Lots of different things you can do for that. But it gets you headspace in the right place. It means you make really good decisions in a really thoughtful way. And then when you execute them, you're focused on what you're going to go and drive to do. So yes, go and do it. Yes, sense check it. And yes, try and surround yourself with those people that give you that circle. And they're all there maybe for different reasons, but the difference between success and failure is tiny. I don't know if you remember the film Sliding Doors, where that instant moment where the life could have gone that way or gone that way. Yeah. I had a moment in Excalibur where we were days away from going bust. And there was a series of events of which I wasn't in control of, although I was the leader, but I ended up having to pick it up without the knowledge or knowing what was really truly happening in the background until almost too late. I managed to fix that, reset the business, learnt a lot of lessons to it. That's when I made the decision of I think it's right I step out and go and spend time with the family, because that takes its toll on you. So within a couple of years, I'm sat there retired, financially secure, or I could have been bankrupt, homeless. And the margins between success and failure is sometimes those 1% things that you did. So I did lots of favours for lots of people. I was also really honest and transparent with lots of people. I had a huge amount of loyalty from people that were around me. All of those things were the 1% difference that you stacked up to then tip it into my favour. It could have really easily have gone the other way. Yeah. And really it's about putting every single thing you can to stack it just that little bit more in your favour. Get it above 50%. It might only be 50.1%, but you know what? It can be that tiny difference where someone ends up sat comfortable or ends up sitting there saying, you know what, I'm homeless. And I've met people in business who've gone from being really successful to living in a hostel within 12 months. And I did all I could to help them, because it was like I can't believe you've had this series of things that have happened to you. It's really unfortunate. You've probably made some of that yourself, but actually it can happen to any of us in life. So go for it, but know there's risk, and know it's not for everyone, right?
I'm a bit speechless by all of that, but you're just so amazing what you do. And moving on slightly to, you're starting work with domestic abuse charities or creating something. So tell me what first connected you with wanting to do something like that.
I think we always get affected by things in our own life, don't we? They influence us, whether that's friends or family. And I had an incident with one of my daughters who was sexually assaulted, and in a really public place, Marlborough Mop. I remember the conversation. afterwards because you could tell she just wasn't right. And, you know, this is 6 o'clock in the evening. Can't get your head around it in some way, shape or form. The things I really couldn't get my head around was actually my wife and my other daughter saying to her, well, it was always going to happen, so you might as well just, you know, get it out earlier in your life, you know. She was 13 at the time. And then secondly saying there's no point reporting it to the police. And I remember just thinking, what? Yeah. This is your story to tell, and they may not find the person because it's really crowded and there's a lot of stuff going on, and they might not find that person, but that's not the point. Your voice should be heard and your story should be heard in some way, shape or form. And I stewed on that for a few days, and then I sat there and thought, I'm going to, you know, try and learn a bit more and, you know, look at that a little bit more. And I say this in a completely shameless way because actually I always thought of myself as being a really good employer, or try to really be a really good employer, and try to be a really good, responsible person in society. And actually, do you know what? I had this absolute realisation in that week after it of going, what an idiot I've been, completely blind to what that is like to live in this world as a female, either as a young female or even as a woman. And then actually, what's that like to be an employer? Because when I started to look into saying around, you know, how females are treated, how they experience life, you start looking at that as an employer's perspective. It just wasn't on my radar. Like, it really wasn't on my radar in any way, shape or form at all. And I feel appalled by that. But actually, I think we've got to talk about that more as a society, and actually male leaders have got to talk about that more, because rather than just saying keep putting it back in the cupboard, because if I have a conversation saying I didn't realise, I didn't know, it just keeps going around in the same cycle. I had a Times Top 100 business, and there was not a single conversation from anyone around domestic abuse, how that could be affecting my team, how that could be affecting those individuals. Then you start thinking about, well, hang on, was that why they were late? Is that why they weren't coming in? Is that why their performance wasn't great? And we were looking at it from a performance management perspective. Why do we never think about it? Why do we not have that chat? And I had some phenomenal people who worked with me as a team and in the people department and stuff like that as well. Rather than me sort of criticising them, I look at it and go, hang on, this is actually a really massive societal issue. Talking to my two daughters then around, you know, the influence of people like Andrew Tate. They've got boys in their years who are subscribed to his university. Yeah. You know, these kids are getting their sort of degree type things at the end of these courses. And the more it's like an onion, the more you peel these layers back, the more you sit there and realise, oh my God, like really, oh my God, how could I have not realised this? How could I have not, you know, been active on it? And actually, in that moment in time, right, line in the sand, I'm not going to be blind to it anymore. I'm going to be proactive. And what can I do? Everything I've ever done, whether it's been helping the homeless or youth charities, I've always tried to do it of how can I help in some way, shape or form? How can I be a servant to the cause, you know? Yeah. And so that's come into a lot of different ways. I'm part of a group in Wiltshire where we just met the Queen recently, actually. And we've tried to pull together lots of different people from lots of different areas. So there are judges there, there are people representing from organisations that are helping. It's a real wide variety of people all coming together to go, how do we join this up? Yeah. Locally in a Wiltshire area, but then also what can we do to influence others to try and create that change? So I try to see what, you know, we did an event at Swindon Town Football Club, very deliberately in a football club. Why? Because when you get a major tournament, actually domestic abuse goes up by around 50%. Yeah. You never exact on the numbers because actually most of it's not reported, as we all know. But I said it in that environment very deliberately and targeted for males to come. And actually, you know, we had 120 people that came into the room, and huge amount of those were males, and every single one of those afterwards going, I didn't know. And the speech I did on that day was, I didn't know. But that's actually okay to not know. It's better to be that in realising it and understanding it than it is to keep going on with a, you know, sort of knowing but don't really want to chat about it in some way, shape or form, you know. And the more you get into that, if any people that are business owners on here now, especially SME businesses, if I ask them now and said, do you realise that as an employer you've got a legal duty of care to the safeguard your well-being of your staff? You know, that's enshrined in the Domestic Abuse Act in 2021. So the guidance that comes with that makes clear that you as employers, you have to consider the impact of domestic abuse on your employees as part of that duty of care. I don't think I know any SME business owners, when I have that chat, that are aware of that. I don't think they get it at all. I don't think domestic abuse is on their radar in any way, shape or form. I don't think they realise the scale of it. When you're looking at, there's around 2.5 million people a year, and no one really knows the exact number, because the reality is what's reported is nominal. But let's take Wiltshire as an environment. Freedom of Information request was done. There was around 40,000 cases over the last sort of few years. Around 90% of the people charged were males. So you can get a flavour where it is, because some people say to me, why are you coming at that from a female angle? And you go, well, if 9/10 are the ones that are receiving it, then that's the reality. It's not discarding the other 10%, but actually it is saying there clearly is a disproportionate amount of females that are being affected by this. And actually, if you think of, that's probably a 1 in 2, 1 in 3, 1 in 4 ratio that's being reported. Actually, that number is huge as a percentage of the population, both here. You look at the other stats saying over the age of 16, 1 in 4 females have experienced domestic abuse in their lifetime. I mean, that number is an unbelievable statistic, and actually, it's costing the UK, the Domestic Abuse Commissioner in 2024 said, it cost the UK £85 billion. So if you look at the cost of businesses, it's in the tens of billions, because it's that lost productivity, it's the absenteeism, it's all those things that aren't being added up together. So the UK economy, £85 billion in that year. That number is the same as we're spending on our kind of education or all these other things. It's a huge amount of money, So I think the more I've tried to get involved in it, the more I've tried to both learn, to share that learning, and then to try and create awareness and to try and pull people together from different places to make those dots joined up. So, yes, encouraging males in allyship, we should stand together, every one of us. Every one of us males have got a mum on this planet at some point. Well, statistically, 1 in 4 of those has been affected by it. And actually, the more you have these conversations, the more someone says, well, actually, do you know what? They weren't ever allowed to spend money. They were told it's not their money to be able to spend. They have to ask permission for that. Well, actually, that's not right. Actually, they were told they weren't allowed to go and see those people they wanted to go and see. Or actually, maybe it was physical. Maybe it was. There's lots of different forms of how that abuse comes. And the challenge is it spills into that area then around violence against women and girls, like my daughter had received. Why? Because in that environment of saying, you're not a human being, you're a thing, I can do this to you with impunity and I don't care about it, it's all joined up into one big kind of spaghetti ball, in some way, shape or form. So, yes, going to help now people that are helping people inside schools so we can get our education better. And again, we be really careful with adolescents and programs that's coming. It's great because it's created a conversation, but it's also demonising young males even more so. So they feel even more isolated, and actually we're at risk of creating even a bigger problem, because actually it pushes them closer towards the Andrew Tates of this world, and trying to get better role models for these people and trying to help the organisations that are trying to help. So, the Employers Initiative on Domestic Abuse, they have free sign up. You can get free policies for you as a business to go and use. And they pull some people together. I'm just working on trying to get an event for them later this year that we can do in the Southwest, because a lot of stuff is London based. So actually trying to get it out of London and drag it over to the Southwest area. People like Society Without Abuse. So that's a local one that's been based in Swindon but now going far wider. So they help engage with businesses in training and support, etc. And the one I know you know very well, the Holly Gazzard Trust, who do support programs and consultancy to try and help businesses. So there's a lot of help and there's a lot of support out there from these organisations. It's just making people aware that it's there. The first step, it's a bit like creating that business, the first step is the hardest step. Yeah. It's walking through that door to go, I didn't know about it. I haven't got any of the policies. When I walked into West Spring, again, hands up, they employed a HR professional to do their handbook and do their stuff, like most SME businesses do. Yeah. Is there anything in there for that? No, there's not. You can either hide that, you can bury it, you can sit there and go, okay, You're not an untypical business, right? You probably haven't got, massive HR team like the corporates have got. So if you look at the people that have signed up to lots of these things around domestic abuse, they're large corporates because they actually understand their legal obligations better, and they've got massively dedicated teams. So one of the conversations I'm just having at the moment with one of the largest HR support organisations in the region is, why are you not telling these employers? Some of these are, if they can choose to ignore it, well then ethically that's, probably legally it's not right. But actually you're not even talking about it. You're not even mentioning it to them. You're not even putting that in that handbook, even though it's a legal responsibility. So a business owner is rolling along like I was rolling along, merrily thinking we're doing all we should be doing without even understanding or knowing. So I think there's a massive gap there in that knowledge. And then there's that scare of they're going, well, when I open up Pandora's box, I can't ever put it back in again. But I'm trying to take away that fear and saying, no, there's really easy steps. They're not even necessarily costly or complicated. And lots of organisations that can really help you go through that process of learning, understanding, training. And you know what, as a business, you've got huge wins out of that. It'll help you culturally, it'll help you productivity-wise, it'll help you with retention, it'll help you attracting staff. Of course it will in every way, shape or form. So if it's about doing it for the bottom dollar, fine, it will have an impact on that, I've got no doubt, in any way, shape or form. But it's also legally there is an obligation to have as well.
Yeah, and from the staff perspective as well, as you say, with not just from client retention, but attracting, staff retention, but attracting staff to the business. If somebody is going through something from a domestic abuse perspective, and it could be, this doesn't seem quite right to me, but I'm not sure if it's domestic abuse or not, and I'm just going to carry on, but actually go into a business where you know that you'll be supported with that if something were to happen. It's just mind-blowing, isn't it? It's just a complete game changer. Yeah,
it is a game changer. When people start to understand the numbers, and people really don't understand the numbers, and we need to keep banging the drum to make people understand the size and the scale because it's that ginormous. I think when they look at their team, and let's say I had nearly 70 people in that team, you start to run the maths and go, how many of these people at any given time would have been sat in that building suffering from domestic abuse? Half a dozen, 10, whatever that number might be in there. The Wiltshire statistics, when I said we did the free information request, they were from the age of 1 to 104. It affects everyone. So the reality is, you're looking at this and saying, that person is walking into work, you're thinking, how do I get the most out of them every day? But you don't understand what they're living and they're breathing through. And I think the scary bit, it's a bit like mental health. We had this same stigma, didn't we, where people went, it's very hard to go there and talk about someone's mental health because I'm not a trained individual, and I know we have now first aid trainers in that mental health sense, but I think that's where people get scared about it. So it's easier to put a poster on a toilet door and go, call this number. Maybe that is the answer to some of those things, but actually I think it's about trying to give people the confidence to say it's okay to just have the chat. You're not the professional. You don't need to pretend to be the professional. What you need to know is where to send someone and how to get them the right help and the right support. So if you're paying for, let's say, for example, private healthcare for your team, it's exactly the same. They have a challenge. They don't need to tell you all their medical history. Right? You don't need to know the ins and outs of that other stuff. You're not a doctor or a nurse or any of those other things. But actually, businesses will pay for that en masse, in order to make sure their team are looked after. So it's the same thing. It's about saying, do you know what, pay or help those organisations, if you can, that will then give that support to your team and to make sure they know where they can go and to make sure, your managers are trained and they understand they can look for those signs. So rather than saying to someone, actually, do you know what, you've got an issue with being late or absenteeism or productivity issues, go straight to performance conversation, straight to performance management, and maybe we want to get you out the door, right? That's probably what most people are feeling like as a manager or as a business leader, just taking that pause, that one step.
Why are they doing that? And you said then as well, and it's about the education around educating all staff, because if you're sat next to somebody who never picks up the phone if it's 10 to 5 and they leave at 5, but they never pick up the phone if it's past 10 to 5, for example, because they have to be out that door at 5 o'clock, otherwise something's going to happen if they're late. And actually educating that curiosity, I say you don't have to find out the ins and outs of everybody's life and everything,
Yeah.
but just think, actually, is this somebody just being, I'm not picking that up because I'm going to go home in 5 minutes and kind of thing, or is there a reason behind that?
Look, the more you invest in your team, the more you'll get out of your team. So the more you understand them and the more you're there to help and support them. You know, I had people who might have worked for me for a decade say, I might have seen them get married, I might have seen them get divorced, they might have had their first dog might have been run over, you know, might have had their first child, you know, all those things that happen in people's lives, you've seen them go through all those moments, and some of those have an impact on you as an employer. They do. You can look at that and say, someone's going to go off on maternity leave for a year, oh, we've got a hole to fill, what are we going to try and do? Actually, we've got to change the mentality in the UK marketplace of saying, giving that as a relevant example, you know, I've had some returning to work mums. They've been the most phenomenal people that I've employed. So rather than us always thinking of what's the negative of something, you know, or hang on, something's going on over here, so we need to get them out, or I need to find someone else, or if they have got something going on in their home life, then, and you know what, that sounds like it's a bit complicated, you know, we go for something simple. We've all got something in our life, right? There's always quirks and tweaks with all of us in our some way, shape or form. So you're never going to find perfection. It doesn't exist in anyone, anywhere, you know, including in me, right? So what you should look at is to go, if I back this person, I help this person through their real toughest moment of their lives, whatever that might be, and if it is they're, you know, suffering from domestic abuse or whatever it is, the person that will come out at the other end of it, and with your help and support, they will come out at the other end of it, and organisations that can help them as well, will be probably one of your single best employees you ever have. And that's my experience in my career. And I had someone commented on LinkedIn the other day, it used to work for me, and they'd gone for a really messy divorce. It really affected them in work, as it would do. You know, you can't separate your home life for that. And they put a comment in there and said, you'll never know, James, the impact you had on my life at that point in my time, because it was the one time, it's the hardest, toughest moment that I'd ever had in my career. Yet that support meant the world to me. You know, firstly, you know, of course you love reading those sort of comments like that, but that's my obligation as an employer, and that's my reply. Everyone should be doing that.
Yeah.
Why? Actually, when that person put their skills and their experience into the organisation, we went from being a mess from a process perspective to being ISO accredited within 12 months. The transformation was unbelievable. So I got the benefit as the business owner and the business leader. Why? Because of caring and because of trying to give them that right support. So, you know, it's the same thing. And sometimes I think it's more obvious to employers on some of those things of what can I do to help, you know? Mm-hmm. So you're returning to work, mother, do you want to go part-time for 3 months or 6 months? You know, because it's a more transactional thing. We understand that, you know, you were pregnant, you got a big bump. Even as a male, I can get my head around that in some way, shape or form, you know. We just got to look at these other things in exactly the same way. Some of them might not be so physically obvious, right? But actually, it's the same conversation. What can I do to help you in this moment of time? That could be, I can help you, I can do things for you, or actually I can work with other organisations to come and help you. And if you need to take that time, you take that time. Employers helping those organisations that are then helping those individuals is part and parcel of the cost of business. That's the way I've always seen it. So these organisations, these charities that are helping, ultimately they don't have a God-given right to exist. They exist because people support them. Yeah. And businesses have got to look at it in a way that says, if I help you to help me, that's a sustainable path for everyone. Everyone wins out of that equation. Well, you know, the talent pool in the UK is getting smaller and smaller. After Brexit, it's factually there. You know, the number of vacancies is going down. It's getting harder. So the reality is, you know, you need to employ people from a wide range of backgrounds, and you need to retain your best talent, and you need to attract the top talent. Regardless of sector, it's the same for everyone in the UK marketplace. So actually, if you're doing things by showing, I can either help you in that moment of time, or I can help your productivity, or I can give you that level of understanding that means that you stay with me for longer. It's the right thing to do as a business, and it's also the right thing for the individual. And like I said, you'll look back in 10 years' time, or 5 years' time, wherever that is, and going, not only can hopefully feel good about yourself because you've had a real impact on that person's life, But is that the leader you want to be? Is that the business you want to have? Because that's what you'll be remembered for. It won't be the money you've made or the stuff you've done. It'll be the impact you've had on those people's lives. That's why I love seeing those sort of messages on LinkedIn. It wasn't those things. It's those moments in time where you realise as a leader you've got a choice to make, and they'll remember that choice. So, I encourage any business leaders that are out there or managers, think of those decisions that you make and just think about how you're approaching those things, because that's what they'll remember you for. It won't be what they got paid, it won't be the bonus that they had. It'll be helping them in that moment of their life, which was the trickiest. And statistically, employ 10 people, employ 50 people, do 100 people, statistically the volume inside your building will be scary by the number of people being affected by domestic abuse. Make a better choice, make a better decision.
Everything you've said, everything you do is just incredible. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate everything you do.
No, well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my latest podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links are in the show notes. Or you can contact me on jodie@jodiefraser.com. For more content and updates, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favourite platforms. Thank you once again for listening. Until next time, take care.